Hello, I am your host Chloe Brewster and welcome to The Creative Comeback, a love affair with the arts in podcast form. I talk to creators from all different walks of life, discussing the ups and downs of being a creative in modern society, delving into the nitty-gritty of the arts industries. Today on The Creative Comeback, I chatted to Jack Bushrod, better known as Bushrod. Creating music that is one of a kind, Bushrod is quickly growing a fan base on social media. With his latest single, Hide and Seek, pulling in thousands of views on YouTube, it's clear to see that Bushrod is well on his way to stardom.
Perfect. So my first question is, why did you choose music as a career?
So growing up, I've kind of been involved in a very musical background. Like my dad's a musician, and I was always surrounded by just like vinyls, CDs, like loads of different music. So I think it was kind of just like a natural thing for me. And also like you might not think it, but like I'm quite introverted as a person. So like music is like a big thing for me to kind of like allow me to express my feelings, like my thoughts, like my emotions. And even if I don't release music to the public, like I'll always just make music for myself. I think like some musicians kind of do it, for recognition of like for people to, like their music and whatnot. But for me, it's just like more of like to help me with like my thought processes and just like understand like who I am as a person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So would you say that you had a lot of like support to do with like you making music as you were growing up?
Yeah, 100%. Like I think because my dad is a musician himself, he's a songwriter and plays guitar. He's in just like a small local band. Like he was so supportive and still is, like to this day. Like my family is super supportive, and I think growing up, like there wasn't really that many rules, and like I didn't really, like there wasn't any restrictions, and I was never like grounded or anything like that. I was always kind of like free to express myself creatively and just like do what I want to do. I think that helped massively because like I could write these lyrics about anything I wanted, and like most of the time my family would be like, yeah, love it, like really supportive. And they'd always like come to my shows and just like, like when I first started out, there'd be like 10 people at like one of my gigs, and like basically like 50% of the people were like my family. So like, I think, yeah, like support from like your friends and family is like a massive part of like confidence building and just like being who you are almost.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important. Like, I mean, my mum is literally my biggest fan. She's like, oh, I love this, I love that. And I'm like, that, posting it
Yeah.
on Facebook. But I think, like you said, like it's confidence.
Yeah.
If my parents were like, oh, really, we'd want you to do like teaching or something like that, I think I would like feel inflicted and be like, oh, what do I like?
Yeah.
What do I do? Do I do what they want me to do? Do I do what I want to do? And like you said, like I feel like you gain inspiration when other people are supporting what you're doing. You're just free to like do whatever you want to do.
100%. Yeah, I think like music especially because it's such like a creative kind of thing. Like it, if someone tells you no, it's like it sets you back quite a lot. So like having such like support is like such an important thing, I think.
Yeah, no is like the word nobody wants to hear, is it? Where do you get your inspiration from? Like when you're writing, like your music, where do you get it from?
So inspiration can come from like absolutely anything. So like everyone has their own like different ways of working, but like a lot of the time when I'm out and about, well, that will give me the biggest inspiration. So like the other day, for example, I was just like going to I had this like hospital appointment, and I was like on the tube, and I was like, I always have my notes app like ready just on my phone if I just like see anything, and I literally wrote on my phone just like strangers on a train. And like I didn't really know what it meant, or like didn't know why I wrote it, and I was just like, I just kind of like the sound of it. And then from then I just ended up like going to this appointment, like coming back, and I just ended up writing this like song about this like fictional song about like these strangers on a train and how like people are like interacting with each other and like behaviors, and like there's like kids in uniform, or there's like a guy in a suit, and like I think experimenting and like just being free and just like trying stuff is like a massive like part of it, just like. So I think, yeah, definitely my surroundings, and like another massive one is like my thoughts and feelings. Just like if I'm feeling like really bad about myself, I'll just like write down how I'm feeling in my notes, and then when I'm feeling a bit better, I'll like sort of take elements of that and then like incorporate it into a song almost.
Yeah, definitely. I think it must be nice as well, because obviously when you write it, you've got your sort of thoughts and feelings as to what it means, and then when other people listen to it and they're like, oh, I thought of this when I listened to it, and you're like, oh wow, that's so crazy that other people like put emotions to your songs and things like that.
It's funny because when I've had that a lot of times actually, when like I've written a song about kind of me or like how it's helped me, and like people will drop me a message or whatever and be like, oh, like, you know, strangers on a train, like that reminds me of like when I was on the train and like going to see my dad, or do you know what I mean? It just like, it brings up other people's stories and how it relates, and it's just like, it's such an amazing thing when it like it's with other people. It's like just something that I've thought of, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. It must be so crazy just like seeing it, and like the more people you see like listening to music, it's just like, wow.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. It's like progression is, the progression is like really cool to see.
Like when you started, like, did it take a long time to grow, or was it like quite a big thing? Or
yeah, I mean, I've actually been doing this for years. So like, I originally started when I was like 15, just like messing around and like going to the youth clubs and just like playing around. And then I think, yeah, like as years went by, I just started taking it more and more seriously. And then, yeah, I think the sort of start of 2018, I started like, I was just like, right, like I'm gonna completely rebrand myself and just like start fresh and just like really try to push like my music. And I think the last couple of years has been really like, sort of things have slowly been taken off. And I think it's just a matter of just like keep on going, really.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the first few years, like, I mean, years of doing music, like I saw no results. So it's just like one of those things that just takes ages.
You've got to keep going to push through
100%.
barrier. I was looking at your Instagram before we came on the call.
Yeah.
Like and you just posted, didn't you, a couple of hours ago, of like the pictures of you, and you'd like drawn over it. And I was like looking and I was like, do you know what, like that just proves like they look so cool because it's like jokey and it's funny.
Yeah.
You like don't need to spend a lot of money to pay like all these people to do it, because like people love stuff like that. Like
Yeah, 100%.
it was
I think like a massive thing I've learned about like doing music is like when I first started out, I was like trying to be really professional and trying to like be really like make it look like I'm like a massive artist and stuff. But like I kind of learned like quite soon on that like if I was just like be myself and just like incorporate my own humor into like, for example, like posts like that, it just like it resonates with people a lot more because it's like a lot more real and a lot more just like, do you know what I mean? Like people, I don't take myself too seriously, and I think like people sort of resonate with that. I think as soon as you like start taking yourself too seriously, sometimes people kind of like see through it almost. So I think, yeah, and also going back to what you're saying about like not having a lot of money and stuff, like doing it yourself and just like when you don't have a lot of money, it sort of like forces you to like think outside the box and be like, oh right,
yeah,
like I've got like 100 quid to like make this music video, like how am I going to do it, sort of thing. So
yeah,
it's an interesting way to do it.
often they end up being like the best ones as well. Like
yeah, 100%.
when I've done it, like I made like I couldn't afford to buy like a massive giant snakes and ladders board for one of my shoots, so I spent like 2 days painting cardboard.
Oh
and
my god.
when I actually took the photos, I was like, do you know what, this is better than like what it would have been if I just paid for it and it cost me like nothing.
100%.
But like you said, yeah, it's like you're being authentic, and then you're also like just thinking outside the box, and people, like I said, people love stuff like that. Like
Yeah, 100%.
I know it draws my attention. Like if someone's just like crazy and just does like random shit, I'm just like, oh my God,
It's just like, yeah,
engage.
yeah. I think if you just like show your quirks and like your weirdness and like you don't really care, like it's a difficult thing to do, especially in the public eye. But like if you kind of just like have like a don't care attitude and just like do things yourself, like I think you'll like slowly see progression almost.
Yeah, definitely. So we talked a little bit about you being supported mentally.
Hmm.
Do you think you're supported financially, or would you say that's something that is yet to come?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of like making money from music, it at the minute it's like not obviously my full like, you know, I don't do music full time, but that is the dream. So on the side of music, I do a few different projects. So I'm like a freelance graphic designer. So I work on like poster design, book design, like magazine covers and that sort of stuff. So that kind of pays the bills. But like in the last couple of years, music has like slowly started like gaining a little bit of income. So unfortunately, obviously due to COVID, I haven't been able to do any shows, and like performing is probably like the biggest like like financial based thing that you can get with music. But like Spotify streams are like you get like peanuts really, but like 100 quid here and there from like Spotify streams like does kind of keep you going, and it's like, oh, like I'm actually getting music money from making music. So like although like that's not the reason I do it, but the dream is to like be a full-time musician and make money completely off of music, if you get me.
Yeah, I get you. Do you feel like the government supports like people in your position, people who want to make it their full-time job, or do you think they're sort of like, sort it out yourself?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I don't really know in terms of like politically and like the government too much, because I haven't done like too much research in it. But on a general basis, I think the arts in general were kind of almost like the forgotten industry.
Yeah.
And I think there needs to be a lot more support for artists, creatives. Like, I mean, whatever industry you're in, if you're in the arts, whether you're like a fashion designer, you're like a musician or like an artist or like a whatever you are, like I think there needs to be a lot more support and like a lot more funding as well. Like I know that you can like apply for grants and stuff, but like a lot of grants and like funding, campaigns or whatever, like they don't apply to everyone. So there's been a few funding like opportunities that I've looked into that like don't actually apply to me, because either I haven't been making music long enough or haven't been like self-employed long enough, or so there's so many kind of like setbacks and restrictions that like don't apply to everyone. And I think there needs to be like more of a broad like spectrum of funding and like support to be able to help musicians.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've applied to stuff before and they've been like, oh, you meet all of our criteria, but because you live in this postcode, that like stops you from meeting our criteria now. So I'm like, even though like everything else was like in line, and they were like, yeah, everything else is fine, it's just that one thing, just because my house is like in the same postcode as like a different area, even though obviously postcodes are huge. So it's like, yeah, sorry, you don't count now. And I know people have had the same thing. So
yeah, I think obviously like I know that the government, for example, with like I think a few months back they sort of asked like creative people to kind of like retrain and like look into like different careers, and like it's not a case of like having to retrain. It's about like supporting the people that like want to like do what they want to do, like especially the music industry like brings like millions of pounds into the economy, but for some reason the government decide that like it's not worthy of any like additional support.
I know. And something else that I was going to ask you about was, do you think that they sometimes try and make it out like being in a creative industry is like unskilled and the easy option, and like belittle it a little bit, like, oh, you don't need to have any proper skills to be in the industry, why don't you just go and be a scientist or something, or learn to be something else that's more important?
Yeah, I think like people definitely like, as a musician, like 100% people kind of, especially like the government as well, like almost look down on you because they think that it's an easy job, like not a lot of effort has to go into it. But like I think a lot of people forget that like there's so much work that has to go into it. Like like there's the writing of the songs, there's the recording, there's the editing, the mixing, the mastering, there's like the recording of music videos, there's like marketing on social media, there's performing at shows, there's like the admin, the emails, and like so much work goes into it. And like a lot of the time it can be quite a stressful job because there's so many different things that you have to think about and do. So I think definitely like the government and even in general, like people like look down on like the arts, I think in general. And I think I've got quite a few friends who are like in the within the arts, and like some of them are photographers, and like photographers, for example, are like super looked down on because it's just like, oh yeah, like you can just like click a camera and like you do you know what I mean, you've done your work, but like so much effort goes into the the composition, the editing of imagery, like the purchasing of the kit, that like the learning of the kit, like the techniques, like there's so many different like aspects that goes into like photography. And like people definitely look down on that, I think.
Yeah, it's so expensive. Like I know, like to get a good camera, you're talking like £400 or £500, and that's just with the basic like kit. and then like another £200. It's just like you said, like it's looked down upon, but it's so much more than just like clicking the button and putting it on, putting it online.
100%. And I think also just going back to your previous point about how like, you know, like people or the government look down on like certain arts and stuff. And I think coming from like a graphic design and art background, like people forget that like graphic design or like a graphic designer is like absolutely everywhere. So like you could literally, as soon as you open the door, you'll see like design work, whether it's like a signpost or like a car badge or just like a number plate or like, you know, the Tesco logo, or do you know what I mean? Like it's everywhere, but like people forget that like because like in the arts, it doesn't. I mean.
Yeah. We were actually, I was talking about this with someone earlier. We were saying like even someone's designed your microwave, like
yeah, 100%.
Like, it's designed, you can't get away from it. Like even black hoodie, someone's designed that black hoodie. You're like, you can't ever get away from it. Sort of on that note, like what do you think it would be like in the world if we didn't have the arts in them?
Wow. I think it would be a lot more dull, a lot more kind of like bleak, and that's such a difficult question. I've never actually thought about it. I think, like, I think the arts especially is like allows you to like express yourself and like create, and it allows like people just to like be free and just like do what they want. And I think that the world would be like a lot more restricted and a lot more strict and a lot more kind of uptight almost.
Yeah.
And I think that the arts kind of like allows people to just like express themselves and like be free and kind of like do as they please almost.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like one of those, it's just like you can't imagine it because we've always had art in the world, so it's one of those things, imagine something that you'd never live without.
Yeah, I think it's just like people probably do take it for granted. Like if we did live in a world without art or like the arts in general, like it'd be such a weird place because like you wouldn't have cinematographers and you wouldn't have like directors, so you wouldn't be able to watch movies, you wouldn't be able to like, I don't know, like there would be no posters on the streets, there'd be no like social media advertisements, there'd be no like there wouldn't be like, there'd hardly be like any colour in anything because like there'd be no designers to do it, or I don't know, it'd just be a very, very weird place.
And like especially being in lockdown, what do you do? Like
you'd just be staring at a white wall.
Yeah, literally just sat there. I mean, would you even have a house? Because they're all designed by somebody, so
yeah, the architect has designed it, so like you probably wouldn't actually have a house.
Sat there like, oh, what do I do now?
You wouldn't even have a tent.
Oh, yeah, literally, you'd have nothing. If you actually like deep it, like you literally would have nothing.
Yeah, you'd literally, I don't know what you'd be doing. You'd just be like.
So I just don't think people realise like the actual importance of it, and it's only when you actually think about it.
Yeah.
Things are like
100%.
How do you think that this coronavirus sort of period has impacted the arts? Do you think it's had a positive effect or a negative or a bit of both?
I think from personal experience, I think a bit of both. So at the start of lockdown, I was working for like a graphic design studio and they were like losing a lot of money and they like couldn't really keep people on. So they basically kind of like cut me off and I basically lost my job like there and then. I didn't really have no idea that it happened. And then for like the first few days, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I was like really stressed, like panicking, like, cause all my mates had like still been working or they'd like, you know, they'd been furloughed and like they were fine. And like, it sort of seemed like I was the only one that was like, what am I going to do? But then sort of, as the sort of weeks went by, I sort of got a bit more comfortable and started getting a bit more work in from like other places. And then I was just sort of said to myself, do you know what? I'm just going to like focus on my music. So it was kind of like a blessing in disguise in a way, because like, I had so much more time to work on my music and like things started like really picking up. So like from a personal experience, like it was almost like a negative turning into a positive.
Yeah,
I know like obviously that's not the case with everyone. Like there's obviously like a lot of people that like, you know, are still struggling, but I think in the like the arts in general, I think has suffered like majorly and musicians especially have sort of had to find like new ways to kind of like interact with their audiences and like still release music but like in different ways. So it's sort of like we were sort of saying earlier, it like forces you to think outside the box and like think of different ways of like doing stuff. For example, like, you know, doing virtual gigs, or, you know, like doing, I don't know, if you're an artist, you'll do like a virtual, you know, art session, or, you know, like people are doing you know, like online gym classes and that sort of stuff. So I think like creative people in general always have like different ways of like thinking about stuff and like doing things, and I think it's kind of been interesting to see how like artists and like the arts has flourished, but at the same time been so restricted. So I think like the answer to your question is probably like a bit of both.
Yeah, definitely. I think I definitely have had moments where I've been like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've just lost all creativity. And then
Yeah,
I've had points where I'm like, actually, like I could do this so easily in my back garden or whatever. And it's been one of the best things that I've done, and it looks like great. And
yeah,
it is interesting to see how people have adapted to it. And I think as an industry, we've sort of turned around and gone, okay, well, you've taken everything away from us, but we're still gonna like be back and we're better than ever. And I think when stuff starts to open up again, like we're really going to bounce back. And like, well, looking at the festivals already that have sold out, it's like it's going to be crazy, I think, when things open up again and everyone can go back out and experience it.
yeah, 100%. I think like just like what you're saying about, you know, like bouncing back and stuff, like I think, you know, the arts in general is already at like a good place in terms of like being forced to kind of like create stuff and like outside the box. But it will, I think, when lockdown ends and coronavirus sort of like slowly draws to an end, hopefully, we'll just see an absolute surge of like musicians and just like creatives just being able to like be free and just like do exactly what they want. So it's kind of an unusual time, but like an exciting time at the same time.
Yeah, I think it's going to be so weird, like when you can go back into the studio, or you can like
Yeah,
studio and you're like surrounded by like a full-on team, and you're like, oh my god, like this is so weird. I'm not in my bedroom like creating.
but even just like going back to what you said about festivals, just like I can't imagine myself being at a festival with like hundreds of people. I just can't picture it because it's been so long.
I'm like, I feel weird because obviously I think it's only been like 6 people, hasn't it, that you've been allowed.
Yeah,
So like going from that to having like thousands of people, it's going to be so crazy. I think
yeah, can't wait though.
exciting, like you said, like it's exciting, and I think it's got everybody through like the hardest part, because everyone's like, oh, better things coming, and the arts have a massive part to play in that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So do you feel like you have a pressure all the time to be creative, even when you're like mentally just ready to just stop?
Um, I think when I first started doing music, I did feel a pressure because there was like I was kind of felt like, oh, you know, there's people that like my music, and I kind of have to make music for them. But like the more I did music, and the more I kind of understood that like I'm doing it for me before anyone else. And although that sounds quite selfish, it's like that's the reason I do it, is to like help me. And you know, if it helps other people, that's like an absolute massive bonus. So I think, yeah, so I think, yeah, I think it definitely helps me. And then, yeah, I think it's a difficult question, but I think in general, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like the more you get used to it and the longer you're in the industry, the more you sort of realize to separate like how you feel with your work, and you're like, I can't do it all the time. Sometimes you just gotta like put some trash TV on and just like watch it and just not think about anything.
Yeah, 100%. And I think sometimes when you do just kind of like relax and just like do different things. For example, I've recently started doing like a little bit of meditation. Just kind of like helps with my thought processes and just calms me down and just like allows me to focus on like what I want to do. So like I think sometimes if you have like a creative block and you're like not sure, you know, like you're almost like forcing yourself to do it. Just like I kind of found that just like giving yourself a little bit of a break, just like go for a walk around the block and just like finding new ways of inspiration, because obviously especially in lockdown, like a lot of the time you're just in the same room or the same house for like days upon time. So I think getting out of your surroundings and like your comfort zone sometimes will just like help with your creativity to flourish.
Yeah, definitely. Like like you said, you probably produce your best work once you're like at your calmest level. So
Yeah, 100%, definitely.
how have you developed your career? What's been your like most important feature, like social media, like advertising, sort of what's your go-to?
I think for me, like a massive part of like what I do, I know it's different with every like musician and, you know, people in the arts, but I think like a big part of what I do is like the visual side of my music. So obviously like music is like the main priority, but like like an absolute massive part is the visual side of things. So like, for example, like the artwork of my single covers or the music videos that I do, or just like photography that I post, and just like visual, like before I like upload it or post it or like put it online or whatever, I think to myself like, is it aesthetically pleasing, and does it like fit with like my brand and like who I'm about? So I think a lot of people kind of forget that, like, you know, if you're a fan or a supporter of someone, you know, you might not ever meet them, but like to understand them as a person, like you have to kind of almost give them everything that you've got and try to understand on a visual basis, if that makes sense. It's sort of hard to understand, but yeah, I think like the visual side is like a big part of like what I do, and like I love doing it. I love like creating the artwork. I love like doing photo shoots and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think it allows the audience to like understand you, like who you are, like better as a person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So do you create like all of your own artwork covers?
Yeah, so like all of the artwork that you see like on Spotify and stuff is all just completely created by me. So a lot of the time I'll kind of art direct it with a lot of my mates are photographers, so I kind of, you know, get them to take the photos. And I think the first EP that I released, which was Happy Go Lucky, I actually got loads of like different props from like the local tip, like painted them all and then like propped them up in my back garden, and then like my mum just took the photo. So I think like sort of DIY aspect is like a big thing to like my music as well, because you can just like, do you know what I mean, like no one would know that I took that photo in my garden and like my mum took the photo, but like, you know, it's just I think a lot of the time it's like about perception as well. Like people online like see you and, you know, they think you're an established artist, which I'd like to think I am, but at the same time I'm just like a regular boy. I'm just like anyone, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would never have been able to tell that you like it yourself. Like
Yeah.
I thought that you like had people that would do it for you, and then
Yeah.
I can't believe you do it yourself. That's crazy.
I mean, it's similar to what you were saying about, you know, when you were doing, was it chess or snakes and ladders or something in your back garden? Almost similar to that, like, you know, like probably if you put it out or whatever, like no one would really know, but like it's just it's yeah.
It's crazy. Like so you got every aspect. You control like every sort of like what's every side that people see to you.
Yeah, essentially, like I think just having creative control is like a massive part of it. Just like being able to just like put out what you want and just like, yeah, not really taking things too seriously, I suppose, just like creating what you like and what you enjoy doing, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Do you sort of feel like your creative goals are supported, or do you feel like by society as a whole, or do you feel like it's really hard to just follow your dreams because people are always telling you no?
Yeah, like I mean, throughout the years, I've like lost a lot of friends because I don't know, they've either like not understood like what I do or like what I'm about, and people don't understand, like especially as a musician, like if I'm trying to get like my friends to come to gigs or whatever, and like they're being rude about it or they don't want to come, I don't really want to surround myself with people like that. I kind of only want to surround myself with like yes people, if that makes sense. So I think a big part of like being in the arts is like surrounding yourself with like positive people. And like if anyone tells you no, like I mean for me, like at the start when I started making music, when I like people started telling me no, I find it difficult to come to terms with. And like if anyone doubts you, it's like difficult to come to terms with. But now like it's like the opposite. I actually love it when people say no, because I kind of use that as like energy to kind of put into a positive thing. So like if someone's like, oh nah, like don't want to do that, or like, you know, your music's rubbish, or I remember at school like people will be like, oh, like they just say like bad things about my music, and like to this day I remember those exact conversations. And like if I'm ever like, you know, feeling down or whatever, I'm like, no, I remember what so and so said, and that's just like adding more like rocket fuel almost for me to just like carry on going and just like prove them wrong almost.
Yeah, like knows the biggest like motivation, I think, because
Yeah, 100%.
it's wrong or like you get a no. I think I'm like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm gonna.
100%. It's like it's not an easy thing to do. Like if, like I don't know, especially as like someone that puts so much like effort into stuff into the public eye and people don't like it, you almost have to force yourself to like accept the no's and just kind of like move on and just like deal with it almost.
Yeah, and I feel like you don't even realize like when someone says something about you, or you're never going to do this, you don't realize when you actually do achieve it, and then you look back and you're like, wait, like someone told me I couldn't do that, and then I've done that and more now, and it's sort of like, and you'll find it's those people that are like, oh, you're never going to do it, that like when you do make it, they'll be like, oh, do you remember when we were in school, like we're friends, and you're like, oh.
I've had that so many times, like old school friends that will message me now and be like, oh, like you're doing so well, like so good to see you, and like hope you're well. And it's like, I remember in like year 11 when you told me that like you didn't like my music and this and that. So like, why are you messaging me these years later? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it's funny how the world works.
Like everyone just wants to be like, wants to know you when people know you, but when
Yeah.
no one's really interested.
Yeah, like I think I saw a quote the other day, and it's like nobody ever wants to start being seen at the bottom, like not with nothing, but like you have to start somewhere. So like,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? You might as well just start now, because in a year's time, and you hadn't have started, you would still be in the same place. So like, do you know what I mean? Like, why wait?
Yeah, what are you going to lose? You've got nothing.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years. So I sort of like to set myself like a lot of goals. Like a lot of the time, they're like personal goals that I like kind of keep to myself. But a lot of the time, yeah, I like sort of plan to like where I see myself almost. So like in 5 years' time, I kind of want to be touring the world. I'm not sure if I want to be like signed to a major label or if I want to be independent. But like right now, I kind of see myself like being surrounded by like a creative, like positive team who would like help me a lot more with like, you know, obviously we've spoken a lot about how I do everything myself, but obviously, you know, as things start to progress and hopefully, you know, my music becomes a bit bigger, I won't be able to do everything. So kind of like see myself being around like a bigger team. By like next 5 years, I want to like have a proper album out. And yeah, I think just like doing everything that like a big musician will be doing. And I think a big one for me is also what we've spoken about is earning money from music like properly. So I want to be earning like a proper wage, and like I say wage, but you know you just probably get chunks of money when you're a big artist. But you know I want to be kind of financially, you know, stable and just enjoying life really.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like the dream, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I just feel like it's one of those like if you believe it can happen, then it will.
Yeah, I think like I speak to a lot of people about like self-doubt and like self-belief and stuff, and like self-doubt is like the biggest creativity killer. Like it's the biggest like thing that will, you know, if you say no to yourself, like you're basically saying no to everyone else. And like if you believe in yourself, everyone else will believe it. You just have to be like you almost have to just like force yourself to believe, and just like I am going to like be, you know, a successful musician within the next 5 years. And a lot of the time for me, like I sort of I read a lot about stuff about like manifesting your thoughts and like thinking about like what you want to be. And I think if you just like think what you want, like you will become it. It's just a matter of like it's a matter of time. You have to have patience and you have to be determined, and like you will get there.
Definitely. I'm a massive believer in like faking it till you make it.
That is basically like my career to date, just like fake it till you make it. 100%.
Act like you're the biggest thing. People believe you are. I mean, I've watched countless videos where people like dress like they're front row of a fashion show and walk in and they just let them in without even looking. Like,
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy. Actually, I mean, I did actually perform at I performed at Field Day a couple of years ago in London, and I had like I wasn't like a big artist. I was just like one of the smaller artists on a small stage, and I had like this small like artist wristband, but it only got you into like certain places of like the stage and stuff. And I just like was just like, no, do you know what? I want to go behind the main stage where all the big acts are. So I just like got the confidence to just go up to like the security and just like, yeah, like artist, and they just let me straight through. And I think like exactly like you're saying, if you just like believe it, like you're confident enough and just like fake it till you make it, sort of thing, like you will get there.
I just think it's so funny how like the world works, that you could like actually just fake it and people are just like happy to go along with it because you've got the confidence. Like,
Yeah,
confidence, I think.
100%. It's crazy.
How do you look for your opportunities in the industry?
I think, yeah, it's kind of like took me a while to learn it, but I think I kind of, rather than like looking for them, I kind of just like make them. So a lot of the time I'll just, you know, if I'm trying to contact, I don't know, like somewhere BBC radio introducing, like rather than just like finding them on Instagram or just like message them on Facebook, I'll like find like the presenter, like finding the producer of their show's email and then like dropping them an email. So I think it's always just like digging a little bit deeper than like what's on the surface. So like if you want something, you just kind of have to almost like navigate your way around like what you want and like find what it is you exactly want, but like go in like a different way about it, almost sort of like stumbling over my words because I know what I'm trying to say, but like I think, yeah, just like doing things a little bit differently, because like if you think, oh, I want this, and everyone wants it and everyone's going the same way about it, like how can I like take a different approach or take like a slightly more unique approach so like someone will notice me? So I think it's just about doing things slightly differently.
Yeah, definitely. You just got to stand out and people that follow.
Yeah, 100%, definitely.
Switching subjects a little bit, have you seen the government like retrain campaign with the ballerina?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have seen that.
What's your opinion on it?
I think it was pretty ridiculous. I think, from what I remember rightly, it was basically kind of like it was almost like influencing people in the arts to like retrain as different careers or whatever. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think just because it's the arts, like why should people have to suffer? Like they weren't targeting like bankers, or they weren't targeting like anyone else. So like why specifically the arts? Like if you think that the arts won't, you know, flourish during lockdown, why don't you like give them additional support rather than like spending loads of money on these ads? You could have spent that money on, you know, the actual support of people in the arts industry. So I think, yeah, it was like we were talking about earlier, it's sort of almost putting people down and making you feel bad for doing the profession that you're in.
I think they sort of like as well made a bit of a mockery of themselves.
Yeah.
From the way they're like, yeah, you don't need the arts, but then like the amount of people that like dissected it and were like, well, someone's taken the photo, someone's started someone's put the like graphics together, like so many people involved, but like all retrain.
Yeah, crazy. But like, even I don't know specifically about the ballerina image, but like, you know, someone's like designed that, you know, the ballerina outfit, or like the photographer's taken the photo, like an editor's like edited the image, and like it's almost just like, yeah, so contradicting.
Yeah, it's just like, it's crazy, isn't it? It's just like they just think that's skilled.
Yeah, yes, yeah. I think a lot of the time, like politicians and like the government, I don't know, I'm pretty sure basically all of them don't come from like a creative background, you know. Some of them have been like editors of newspapers or like writers or authors or whatever. And I think, yeah, they don't understand the mindsets of like people in the industry, and they don't really understand the concept and like how it works. So I think if they sort of took, you know, spent a day in like either our sort of two shoes, like they would understand like how it works and like, you know, how we go about our daily lives.
Definitely. And the final question is, do you have any other thoughts or feelings on the underfunding of the arts and the treatments of the arts during the pandemic as a whole?
I think, yeah, I mean, I could go on for ages about how like frustrated I am about it. I think in general, I just think it's kind of like ridiculous how the government like expect, you know, people like me and people like you or like your industry to just like retrain and just like find other jobs. And because I think I remember seeing a documentary, and it was for I think it was like waiting staff in Manchester, and it was like a documentary about like 100 people or maybe even thousands of people had applied to this one job, and within that one job there was like graphic designers, there was like a pilot, there was like musicians, like there was a lot of people that were in the arts that were applying for this like waitressing or waiter job. And it kind of just goes to show that like all of these talented, skilled people have so much like to give to the industry and to like the economy. But here they are like applying for like an entry level job which they have absolutely no experience in, but they're almost like forced to, you know, apply for these other jobs which they don't want to do. And in the end, a lot of these like people who were like so talented, had degrees, and like some of them even had like PhDs and stuff, were like didn't get the job because they were overqualified. And I think a lot of the time that kind of just speaks a thousand words, that like all of these people in the creative industry are applying for this job which like has absolutely no relation to them at all. Like I think that just kind of says it all. So I think in general the government need to support the arts a lot more. They need to like listen to the thoughts and feelings of people that are actually involved in the arts industry, and just be a lot more open-minded. I think they're so closed-minded, and as soon as it comes to arts, like we're like, no, like we're not giving you any funding. Like especially like arts in schools, I know like music and art and that sort of stuff has been like stripped from like a lot of schools, or like, you know, like stripped back a lot. And I think if they just gave people a voice and gave people a little bit more attention, they would understand that like a lot more money could be made for like the economy, which would actually benefit them.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
They decided against it.
It's like one of those things, like you said, you're like damned if you do and damned if you don't, because if you stay in the arts, like there's like no opportunities right now. But
Yeah,
it's like you said, they're like, oh sorry, you're too qualified for us, like, or we can't take you on because you've got too many different skills that we don't need, not the right one.
yeah.
Can't win.
Yeah, actually, I was literally going to say you actually can't win, and it's almost, yeah, it's kind of sad in a way that the government don't, you know, want to help people in the arts, because COVID isn't like our fault, but it's almost like they're making it feel like it is our fault. It's like, oh, you know, there's this like pandemic, there's this like deadly disease that's, you know, that's out and about, and it's like your fault, and it's like it's not.
We're the ones that have kept everyone entertained while they've been sat in their house.
Exactly. So yeah, it's kind of frustrating, but I think hopefully when the pandemic ends, it will almost bounce back, like you say, and just sort of show them who's boss.
Well, thank you for answering my questions.
No worries at all. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You